Hi everybody, and thank you for joining us at the Microsoft Power BI UK user group. My name's Leon Gordon, and it's an absolute pleasure to be back with you this week. Thank you for everybody for joining us. Like I say, it's great to see you all with us again, and we have another fantastic session for you today with our friend MVP Reza Rad. We're going to be looking at row-level security patterns in Power BI. So as always, we want this to be a fully interactive event. So I will be opening up the Q&A shortly for you to ask any questions that you have on tonight's subject matter. So please do feel free to let us know where you're dialing in from there, and obviously to ask any questions throughout the session as well. So I'll just give a brief introduction on our speaker for today, and then I shall hand over. So as I previously mentioned, today joining us is Microsoft MVP Reza Rad. And Reza Rad is a Microsoft regional director, an author, trainer, speaker, and also a consultant. He has a BSc in computer engineering and has more than 20 years experience in data analysis, BI, databases, programming and development, mostly on Microsoft technologies. Reza is an active blogger and also the co-founder, as I'm sure you're aware, of Radicad, and also the co-founder and co-organizer of the Affinity Conference in New Zealand and the Power BI Summit, the biggest Power BI conference, of which early bird tickets are currently available. So please do make sure, if you haven't already, that you do make sure that you get your tickets in place. So he is also an international speaker at Microsoft Ignite, the Microsoft Business Applications Summit, Data Insight Summit, Past Summit, SQL Saturday and user groups, and is also a Microsoft certified trainer. So I'm sure that you will all join me in saying that we're in a very good company for today's session. So without any further ado, I'll hand you over to Reza for his session.
Great, thank you, Leon, for the introduction. Much better than what I could explain for myself. Okay, just checking, can you see my screen? Is it all good?
Yes, we can indeed.
Okay, great. Good morning, good evening, especially for those of you joining from UK and European parts of the world. So thank you for joining this session. I'm Reza Rad. Leon already explained about me. This session is about row-level security. I wouldn't go much into again introducing myself, just mentioning that I have written some Power BI books. One of them is specifically about row-level security. So if you are interested, you can go and check that out as well. So let's jump into the topic itself. I will have some points that I'll stop during the presentation and we can take questions there. So first, I'm going to talk about what is the row-level security and showing you very basic examples of that, which we call it static row-level security. But after that, we'll talk about what is the benefits of doing something called dynamic row-level security versus a static row-level security. And once we are doing dynamic row-level security, what are different patterns for that and differences between those patterns? There are a lot of patterns. I'm going to talk about like 2-3 of those in here. So first thing is what is row-level security? Now, in the world of Power BI, when you build a content, when you build a report, you share it with others. That sharing mechanism can be controlled using workspaces, apps, any methods that you use for sharing. But the data in that report can be filtered or can be adjusted by a security mechanism. We call it row-level security. Now, recently in Power BI, you can also do column-level security and object-level security, which I'm not going to talk about those. Those are defining security on the table itself or on a column of that table. When we talk about the row-level security, we are talking about filtering the data rows. For example, this is a session that I'm mainly doing demos for that. So I'll start with the first demo here. Let's say I'm getting data from sample dataset. Now this is AdventureWorks dataset. This Excel file is available in Radicad website. You can go and download it. Let's say I have 2 tables. Fact reseller sales. This is a table that has sales information in it, with also some information about who is the reseller of this, and what is the sales territory of this. Now I have also a dimension called dim sales territory. Dim sales territory is a table that has sales territory areas, and you see I have territory group, region, country. For example, one territory can be UK. And then I have some users who are looking at my report from UK. I want them to be only seeing the records for UK, not for everywhere else. So what I'll do, I'll just load these two tables into Power BI first. Now, Power BI has this thing called automatic detect relationship, which if in the data source you have fields that are matching somehow, this would detect that relationship based on some rules. And here it actually did that. You can see that these two tables are related based on the sales territory key from here to there. This relationship basically means filtering. That means if I look at one sales territory country here, I would see the sales of that country in the other table. As an example, when I go and build a visualization with sales amount from my sales table, and then from sales territory table, if I go and bring country, that country slice and dice this value. So I see every country's sales. I'll enable the data label as well. And how much sales we have in every country. I can also have another visual here showing just the sales in total. So nothing really, complex here. It's just a bunch of visualization. One of them is sales by country, another is sales itself. Now, if I share this report, to others, at the moment, everyone who will have access to this report in Power BI website will see everything. What I intend to do is that if someone comes and see this report, they see their part of data. Like, for example, I might have a branch manager in Germany. I want that person to see only Germany's data, branch manager in Australia to see only Australia's data or France data. And this is not just high level data. This can be also, for example, a table. I'll just put that into another page. This can be a table that in this table I have some details about that transactions. For example, I can bring the order data of the transaction. Let me make it a table view. The order data of the transaction, things such as, for example, order quantity, sales territory group, region, all of this information, right? I can go to the details of that and bring every single, for example, product key over there as well. And this applies on all of those, right? I'm going to show you how this applies there. So at the moment, this shows all the countries. It shows Australia at first because now we are looking at every single transaction. But if we scroll down, it would be all the countries because you see the total is matching the total here. Now, I'm going to secure this data and I'm going to say, for example, Australia sales manager should see only Australia or UK sales manager should see only UK. One of the ways to do this, of course, this is called row level security, but one of the ways to do this is finding which table should get filtered so that your results data gets filtered. So, of course, the sales amount is here. That is where my dollar amount or pound or whatever currency you are using is coming from. But the country is here. If I'm going to filter the country, for example, I have to filter this table. The good thing is that because I have this relationship here, if I filter that table, that automatically will filter this table. So I'm going to define my filter on the country then. And the place that I do the filtering is in here under security section in Power BI, manage roles. I can go there and I can create a role. I can call this, for example, UK branch manager or whatever it is. Then I see the tables in my model. The table that I have to define this filter on it is the sales territory key. I can start writing the expression here, or I can use this little help here that if I click here, it says add filter. On which column I'm going to add a filter? On the country. So I'll select the country. And it's write this little expression for me, which is DAX expression, of course. I can edit it. It says sales territory country is equal to value. This is a conditional expression. The result of this is true or false. It should return a true or false value here. What I'm going to do is to change this value to United Kingdom, because that is how the values are written in my table. Now, this is not case sensitive, but you can use some functions that be case sensitive, but I don't think anyone would want it to be here in a case sensitive scenario. So that is how I define my role. I'm going to just add one more here for, let's say, Germany as well. Just that you have ability to compare these two. Similar to that, I'll create a similar copy. In this case, it would be German. Okay, so I have two roles. If I go back to my report, I still see everything because I'm the author of the report and I'm in the Power BI desktop. Power BI desktop is the development environment. You will see everything in there, no matter what security configuration is there. But you can test it. You can see how other users will see it. To test it, you can go to the modeling tab here and then click on view as. When I click on view as, I can choose as which user I want to view it. So I have the UK branch manager and Germany. I should have called this Germany branch manager, but anyway, if I select any of these, then I would see the data as that user. So if I select UK branch manager, you see that this is the total of UK sales only for 4 million and like bit. Then when I go to the detail page, also I'll see everything for the UK only. Of course, this could be master detail page where I drill down from one page to another page. And if I go and change it to view as Germany, then I would see Germany's data of 1.98 million, and this detail is also for that country. So this is for my own testing, and I can stop viewing here, go back to the normal view. This is for my own testing. If I want this solution to be published and shared with others after I publish it, yeah, I have some examples of this already. I'm going to open that in a browser window. If I go to Power BI website, now I have already published something similar to that in there. Like, for example, this is one of those. So I have the report here. This is very similar to that. Now, when I share this report with others, which actually I think I did, let me just see who has access to this report. But I mean, for now, I can just copy the link so that I can see for the other one. So I'll show you this report from another user point of view. I'm using another user so that you can see how that user would see this report. So this is the other user view of the report. So here you see this user can only see Australia and Canada versus the actual report behind the scene is for all other countries. So how does it work? After I publish the report into the website, what I'll do is I'll go to the data source for that report. Here it is. Then I'll go to the security of that data source. This is the place that I see the roles that I defined. For example, in my example there, I created one for the UK, one for Germany, but in the example I published here previously, I created one for Australia, one for Canada. What I can do is I'll select each of these. I add the user here. Like, for example, if I want Reza to be a user here, I just type his name. I'll select his email, add it here. This can be, of course, Office 365 groups as well. And by adding that and then saving it, that user will have access to this. Of course, you have to share that content with them as well. Like, for example, if it is in a workspace, you have to kind of like create an app and then share it, and users will have access to that app. But this would define what part of that data they have access to. Like, for example, at the moment, Reza is part of Australia and Canada, but if I remove it from Australia, then the next refresh here would show me only Canada. Let me just refresh this one so that you can see. I don't see a refresh point here. I'll refresh it from here. So this now only shows me Canada. So it gives you a central control access over your data. This is what we call static row-level security. Now I'm going to show you a dynamic row-level security, and then we'll talk about the difference of that, going through a couple of questions as well. So talking about security, this is simple, right? All I did was just defining very simple filter conditions like this, and that's it. Then when I went to the Power BI website, I just added users or removed users from it, right? But there are problems with this solution. The first problem is that I have to, like, if I'm going to have users at each of these, let's say, branches or countries, I'm going to have to add 6 roles. Well, that is not a problem. Easy to go and add 6 roles. But imagine this scenario. If these roles are changing, if these countries' branches are changing, let's say the company I'm working for, they open a branch in South Africa, in China, in India. Every time a new branch is opened, I have to come here, add a new role, save it, publish it. Once published in the Power BI website, I have to go and assign users to that role. This process is static. And that is why we call this method static row-level security. It is simple to define roles. You see, this is really simple. It's just a simple conditional expression. But maintaining this would take time, especially if you have hundreds of roles. Now, this might not happen a lot when you are talking about branches, but it would happen for a scenario like a HR reporting. Let's say you are working in a company. This company has like over 1,000 employees. You are building salary report. And of course, everyone should see their own salary, not everyone else's salary, right? That means if you want to do it in a static row-level security manner, you have to define over 1,000 roles. That is first time consuming. Second, you will definitely make some mistakes when you define 1,000 roles. Third, every time you add a new employee, you have to come here and edit it, publish your Power BI file, add users to it. So it's not really a possible option to do static role security if those roles numbers are changing a lot. What we do instead in those situations is something we call dynamic row-level security. The difference between static and dynamic row-level security is that you move the logic from the Power BI into the data source somehow, into the data model, basically. Still, you have part of the logic of security in the Power BI, but that is a generic part. That is a part that you wouldn't change much. The main logic would be in your data model, in the tables, in the data, so that whenever you want to change something, you just add records into the table or remove records from the table or update the records in the table, not to come and update the PPIX file, which would take some time and it requires a lot of maintenance, right? That is what the dynamic row-level security is about. I'm going to show you an example of that. And of course, after that, we'll go to a few questions. So I'm going to close this one, opening a new Power BI file. And I'm going to connect to a simple data source I've created for this example. It is an Excel data source. All of these demos I'm showing to you, I have blog articles about those and videos. Go and check Radacat website for that. So let's say I'm selecting this data source. Now, this is a simple data source, just 2 tables, basically. I'm going to show you in a second. Here it is. I have just 2 tables. One table is the sales transaction. And I keep them small tables so that it can be understood really easily. So sales transaction, each transaction is saying that at what date, which sales rep had what sales amount transactions, right? That is the record like that. And the sales rep table on the other hand side is the actual sales rep, their their ID, their name, and their email. And of course, their ID is used to be in the sales transaction table as a foreign key here. So I'm selecting both tables, loading this data into Power BI. And this can be for HR scenario, one of the tables, let's say employee table, another table can be their salary or whatever else, right? These two tables would be related based on that ID and sales rep. And this basically means that if I have, let's say in this case, I just keep a simple table with the sales rep, name and email, and then the date of transaction, the sales amount. Keep everything here. I'll make it slightly bigger so that you can see everything much easier. One way to make everything bigger is, in the Power BI, is to go to your current theme and change the text size over there so that everything in your Power BI file gets bigger. Okay, so here it is. I have all the transactions. In this case, it's not really that much, but it is something. Jack, Layla, Reza, I'll see all of these. The idea is that everyone should see their own transactions. It is, of course, easy to create 3 different roles, but imagine this is a big organization. We have 1,000 users, and if you want to define it, you should have 1,000 roles. So we are going to do it as a dynamic role-level security. So dynamic role-level security has this concept that first you have to identify who logged into the Power BI. When you find it out, then you go and filter your tables based on that person. If I can find out who logged into the Power BI, then I can compare that with this field, with the email field. For example, if I realize that, well, it's Jack who logged into the Power BI, then let's just filter Jack's record, right? And the place that I can filter that record, of course, is in the sales rep table, because that table is the table that has the emails in it. Now the question is that how do I realize who logged into the Power BI? Now there is a really useful function in DAX, 2 functions actually. The one that we use most often is called user principal name. This function basically will give you the logged in user to the system. I'm creating this measure just to show you how this works. So I'm calling this measure user. There are no input, just user principal name itself. And if I add that into here as a card visual, that shows me the current user. Now, of course, this is my local user. This is my local machine. This is my local user. But if I publish this report into Power BI, this would be my Power BI users, which is basically associated with my Office 365 account. It might be like reza@radacat.com or whatever tenant I'm looking at that. It would be that user, right? So this is a way for me to understand who logged in. Now, when I know who logged in, all I need to do is to filter this table based on that logged in person. So my filter criteria then would be like this. In the manage roles, I defined one role. Let's say I call it user. I don't need to filter the sales transaction table because the email address field email address is in this table in sales rep. So I'll go and add filter on email. Instead of saying it is equal to value, I can say it is equal to that measure I just created. But I created the measure just to show you what it is. You don't even need to create that measure. You can just directly use that user principal name here. It is not case sensitive, of course. And that's it. When I define that, so that is my condition. Email is equal to user principal name. Whatever user logged in, I want that user from this table, not other users. I save it. Now, if I test it here right now, I wouldn't get any correct result. So if I go and check user, I wouldn't get any result. And the reason for that, of course, is because in my table, I don't have that user. You see, these are all my, let's say, Office 365 domain accounts versus this is the local user. Now, if I publish this report in Power BI website, it is perhaps going to work because there I have my Power BI accounts. But to test it locally, one way is to use this username in my data source. So in this Excel file that I've been using as a data source, I can go and change this to be, just checking what was that user. Yeah, here. Reza ZD, there's an underscore. I'm testing, right? So that I can check it in the local and see is it working or not. When I save it, close it, this time refresh it. Now I should have that email as Reza's. Now this means that if I go and check it as that user, the view as user this time should show me only transactions belong to Reza, right? This is for testing, as I said, just to make sure that this is working all fine and perfect. After I did the testing, I can publish it to the Power BI website. Now let me show you that part also very quickly. When you publish this into the Power BI website, there's a difference in this type of report. Here is my report, very similar to that. So first you see that the user changes here. This is my Office 365 user. I have different accounts. This is one of those. This user that published the report will see everything regardless of whatever the account is, because this is the report owner, the report developer will see everything. But what I'll do is I'll go to the security of that data source. There is only one role, of course, user. I'll add other users to this. Now this can be users one by one, but I strongly suggest to create like a Office 365 group, including all the users. Add that here. When you share it with those users, then I'm going to show you what that would look like from the user point of view. So copying the link, coming to this user, looking at that. So this user, now this is the other user. You see when the user log in, this is the account of that user, and user can only see this. This user doesn't even know that other users' data is in there. If Layla logs in, Layla she sees her own data. If Jax logs in, he would see his own data. So everyone see their own data. But the key to this type of role-level security is, of course, maintaining this table. This is the key table where all the information about it is coming from. You should be able to maintain it, which means you need to have a way that someone come and add record to this table, like an admin person or someone like that. It can be done through, I don't know, like a Power App application, or someone can have access to that database itself and add records directly there. If someone leaves the company, they can remove it. And that is all needs to be done behind the scene. This Power BI file doesn't need to change. You just publish it once and it is going to stay like that unless you really want to change your reports and things like that. But for the role-level security access, you just need one role. That is the user role. You don't have much of a logic inside Power BI. The logic stays in this table. That is the key for this. Maintaining it would be outside of Power BI environment, which would be easier, especially if you have too many users. I can show you a few examples of how the role-level security works in more, let's say, real-world situations, complex scenarios. But before that, I'll just check if there is any questions.
There are indeed.
Okay.
So we have one question coming in, which asks, they wonder if you can automate pulling the user list from Office 365 or Azure for the dynamic row-level security user table.
Good question. Yes, it is possible. There are different methods for that. One is, of course, in Power BI, you can get data from, I'm waiting for this to appear, from the Active Directory. So one way is that. Of course, you need an account that has access to all Active Directory information. So you can populate all the users and their groups and then use it here. Another method is to, now this is if you want to populate it directly into Power BI. Another method is that you may want to populate it into some kind of like database table, such as SQL Server database table. You can use PowerShell scripts. There are tons of different PowerShell scripts that you can run. Still, you need to have access to that Active Directory, kind of an admin account or something like that, that runs it and populate list of all the users, their groups and things like that, store it as a database table, then Power BI reads it from there. You can write a C# application working with that. So there are tons of different ways for that, and I would definitely suggest doing that way rather than entering these users one by one in that table.
Excellent, thank you. The next question we have is, what if Layla and Reza are in a team and Reza should see data for both Layla and Reza? So in the example that you've shown there.
Great. So that is one of the patterns I'm going to show you. After this, I'm going to first show you a pattern of manager. Then after that, I show that, like, let's say they have one profile. They have the profile of being in the in this branch, in the UK branch. So they should both have access to the sales data of that UK branch. I'm going to show you that as well. It's a little bit different.
Fantastic. If you don't mind, Reza, before we go into that, if I can just ask these two brief questions. So one from Debbie, is this specific to users, or can you add Azure Active Directory security groups instead?
You can, but still that group should, like those people should belong to a group. Like you still need to have a table, to have a column with their individual accounts. Now you can have another column here that is their group, or this table can be joined to another table, and that table can have the group as one column and the email as another column, so that these two are related. But still you need to have this column at least, because that is the way that the user principal name function is going to find which user logged in. Based on that, you find which group it is, and based on that group, everything filters based on that.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'll go through the next example. So when I talk about role-level security patterns, dynamic role-level security patterns, it is basically the same thing that you've seen in this example, the dynamic role-level security, finding who the user is and then filtering data for that user, but used in a different context. For example, one context here can be, well, I want everyone to see their own data, but if a manager logs in, that manager should see everyone's data, regardless of where they are, what branch they belong. So one access level is to see everything. Another access level is to see your own data. Now, one common practice to do this, I've seen a lot, is that people come and do this. They come and say, well, I'll go to the manage roles. This is for those who see their own data. I create another role, I would call it manager. And then in the manager role, I just say when sales rep is everyone, basically. Now, how that is done, basically, if you create a role with no filter, that means this role will see everything, right? Now, it looks a little bit like hard to realize this means to see everything, but this is a conditional expression. If the result is true, we'll see something. If the result is false, won't see anything. One other way is to come here and type true, right? And the default is true, of course. So this means that this role will see everything. Now I remove that true for now. If I create this and publish it, then all I need to do is to go to the Power BI website and add that manager under the manager role. Now that looks simple, but the problem is that as soon as I create the second role here, I'm going towards static role level security again, because I'm defining the logic here. The logic shouldn't live in the Power BI itself. The logic of saying, for example, this role has the full access, this role doesn't, right? Power BI should be only responsible to find out who logged into the system, pass it to your data model. Your data model should decide now, well, based on that, who has access to what, right? One other approach, which I would call it more dynamic role level security, is to do it all with one role. So without having this manager role, just the user role, but with that configuration. So how that is possible? Let me show you that. I'm going to change my data source here. And, or better to, I'll just create a new Power BI file. The data source is very similar to the one that I have already, with just one small change in this case to find out who is the manager of that specific organization, let's say. So I'll go and get data from an Excel workbook. This time I use this file, which is similar to the previous file. The only difference is I have one column added to the sales rep table, which is manager. So as you can see, everything is the same, only this is new. So I have a is manager column 0, 1, and if it is 1 in this case, that means this user is manager, means in this company Leila is manager. Of course, I'm going to select those two tables, load. The rest of the model is pretty much the same. The two tables are connected based on the sales rep. I'm going to just create that table again with the sales rep name, their email. I would also add is manager here, the date of transaction, and the sales amount, right? So here you see that what transactions we have and who is manager, who is not, right? Leila is manager, and we have 3 transactions now. I want to write one single role covering all of these. And if I go and do that user is equal to user principal name, even when Leila logs in, she would see only her own data. So what I would do is I would write my condition a little bit different. So in that place that I write my DAX expression in this place, I would write it a little bit different. I would first find out who is the manager, or this logged in person, is this person a manager or not? If it is manager, do something. If it is not manager, show them their own data. So like a little bit addition to that expression that we've done. I first add it as a measure here so that you can see how it works. Then I would use that inside that role as an expression. I just keep it measure for now, the name. So first I need to find out who logged into the system. Of course, user principal name will give me the information of who logged into the system. If I add it to the card visual here, it tells me who logged into the system, right? So this is what we had so far before. Now, the person logged into the system, I want to see, is this person manager or not? When you are doing dynamic role level security, DAX is your friend. You have to be writing DAX. You have to write DAX statement to find out some of the information. So I have this field, the email field. I want to pick the is manager field of that user. One of the ways, there are many different ways to do that, but one of the ways in DAX to fetch that information is lookup value. I say lookup value in this table, in the sales rep table. So sales rep table. The field that I'm looking up into is their email field. Oh, sorry, the first one should be the result column. The result column is manager. So I want the is manager, then I'm searching for the email field in the sales rep again to be equal to user principal name. So this is the lookup value statement. What is the result column you want to fetch? I want to fetch the is manager value. What is the column I'm searching into that? That is the email column. And what is the search value? The search value comes from user principal name. This altogether will give me the is manager value for the logged in person. For example, for Reza, this Reza is not a manager, so this is 0. Now, if Reza be a manager, this would be 1, right? So I'm now using this inside a conditional expression. I can say if this whole thing is equal to 1, then it means I'm manager, right? Manager. Otherwise, let's call it this way. If expression works like that, you have 3 sections in an if expression in DAX. One is your conditional expression. If the conditional expression is true, this is what will be returned. If it is false, this is what will be returned. So in this case, if that result is 1, it will be managers. If I press enter on that, you see that I'm an employee, right? Going back to my expression. So now what I need to do is just use that kind of expression in the formula for my role with a little bit changes. In there, I wouldn't use these text values. I would use an expression inside instead of each of these so that it returns the record for that person. So I'll go to manage roles. I'll create one role. I call it user. And the table I'm going to filter is sales rep because that is the table that has the email in it. So I'm going to filter email. But instead of this, I would say this expression. So this should be an expression that returns true or false. It shouldn't return text. So what I'm going to do is to change these parts. Instead of returning this text value, I'm going to return true or false. So if it returns true, that person will have access to everything. So if that person is manager, I would say true, because this person should see everything, right? I'll make it a slightly bigger. No. So just. So this means that if this person is manager, equal 1 is manager, so return everything, true. If it is not employee, employee doesn't mean return everything. Employee means that this person should see their own data, right? And that is with the same logic we had so far before, which is actually the email field to user principal name, similar to what we had over there. So again, what I'm saying here is that if this user is manager, and that criteria is checked over here, if the user is manager, show that user everything. Otherwise, show the user only the records that belongs to this user, right? I save this, time to check it now. I'll go to view as roles. I choose my user. I would be employee and I would see only my own transaction. Now, if I'm going to check that if for a manager, how this is going to be, I can go and open that Excel file. I can change Leila not to be manager, I to be manager, just as easy as that. I'm now a manager. Now let's save this. I'm coming here. I'm just refreshing this report. And this time it should realize that I'm a manager. You can see it here and I see everyone's data, right? And with one role, all of these happened to work just fine because we defined that condition based on our data model. Sorry, I mean to show you it here, based on that data model with a conditional DAX expression like this. Now, if there is no questions, I can go into the example that we had a question about, which is if Leila and Reza are part of one team and they want to see it. Otherwise, if there's a question, we can take it like in a couple of minutes.
Reza. Yeah, we do have a couple of questions. I'll try and fire through them quite quickly. So the first one is, can you use the RLS feature to show report pages based on the logged in person, i.e. person A can see page 1 and 2, but not page 3, and person B can see page 1 and 3 within a report?
That would be something I would call it visual level filter. Visual level security, something like that. We don't have it yet. So there are workarounds. One workaround, of course, is to have one data source, one data set, and creating different reports with different pages for each of those, and then sharing it with the users. Another workaround is what I also write about it in a blog article, which is kind of like a workaround. It's not really a solution, but you can filter your values in a way that shows you that. Let me show you that blog article. I'm not going to show you that whole example, but just showing you how this might work. It's something like this method I showed here. As I said, is not a solution, but go and check for this page level security workaround. I mentioned two different methods. One method is to use one data set, multiple reports. Another method is to kind of like play with the navigation, create like kind of a second table with page level security and then navigation of your pages, not to be using the page navigation itself, but to be using a specific navigation method based on a slicer, and that slicer get filtered by the user. So I explained that in details. If you are interested, go and check it out.
Excellent, no problem at all. I'll put that link into the chat as well. The next question is, can this be implemented into paginated reports?
It can be implemented in the paginated reports as well, because one of the good things about paginated reports is that it can use the same Power BI dataset of your normal Power BI report. They can both share the same Power BI dataset. This setting is a dataset setting, so once you do it in the dataset, all of your reports, paginated or normal Power BI report or dashboard, they will follow the same setting.
Fantastic. And final question, apologies, is can we implement multiple RLS on the same report? So for example, when one report tab runs, it will run on RLS A and the second report tab will run on RLS B.
Not sure what that really means. I would look at that specific requirement. I would first want to understand why would we require to have different RLS for each different report. Maybe we can combine them all in one. I would first ask that question. So more information on that would be helpful. I can answer that after this demo, perhaps.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, so the last demo I'm going to show you here is a different situation. So this was a scenario of showing, well, when we have the one manager, how it is going to work. Now, another situation which is slightly different is when we have something called like user profile situation, or in another word, something that is more like a many-to-many relationship. That would be slightly different in dynamic row-level security. Let me show you that model first, then you can see what I mean by that. I can close the previous file. Did I close it? Yeah, okay. I already closed it, I think. Oh, not this file. This is the one I showed you already. Okay, another Power BI file. So while this is opening, I explain what I mean by that example. So let's say we have different branches, the branch for UK, for US, for New Zealand, but we don't have one sales rep for each branch. Each branch might have multiple sales rep, and the structure is more like this. Okay, the structure is more like this. We have the sales transaction in this table. I'm trying to fit everything in a bigger view so that you can see it much better. No. So I have my sales transactions in this table. So in this table, it says that this is the date of transaction, this is the sales amount, and it belongs to a profile, not to a user. That profile is something like, for example, the UK salesperson or a US salesperson. So my data in the sales transaction table is like this. Date, the profile, sales amount, but the profile itself is like this. For example, Seattle salesperson or manager, Chicago salesperson, Portland salesperson, you can consider it this way. Now, we have multiple people in each of these profiles. For example, for Seattle sales manager, we might have more than one person. For Chicago sales manager, we have more than one person in there. Sometimes we also have one person is the salesperson for Seattle and Chicago, right? So that is why we have this kind of like many-to-many relationship between the profile table and the user table. These two tables are related into this table, which is like a many-to-many relationship table. It says that this user has access to this profile. For example, I, as Reza, can be salesperson of, let's say, New Zealand branch and also UK branch somehow it is possible, let's say. Then I would have two records here, right? So the difficulty of implementing dynamic row level security with this model is the way that filter propagates. So we have the dollar amount here, or the sales value, whatever you might call it. And that should get filtered by the email address of the user from here. So I understand who is logged into the system using user principal name. I filter this table using that. Now, if this table gets filtered, it should pass the filter all the way to this table. And this table should get filtered. That is the idea, right? When this table gets filtered, that means this field gets filtered. In order to get that table filtered, we need to have relationship directions towards that table, not away from that table, right? This means these two relationships are working absolutely fine. This is going towards that direction. This is going towards that direction, but not this one. This is the problematic one because instead of going from user profile to profile, it is going from profile to user profile. And that is going to be problematic for our logic. Now, how we do that? One way is to go and change the direction of this relationship to both directional. I wouldn't recommend that at all. Both directional relationship comes with the cost of making your model slow, even in the row level security situation. So also possible, but I wouldn't recommend doing this. What I would suggest instead is to keep this single directional, but define the row level security rule in a table that can filter the sales transaction table. In this case, the only table here at the moment in this model that can filter sales transaction, considering this is direction of filtering that way, is this table, or the sales transaction table itself. Now I can filter this table with a little bit of DAX logic. My DAX logic should first find out who logged into the system, find out all the profile IDs that this user has access to, and then filter this table based on that profile IDs. And that is a DAX expression you can write. Let me bring a version of this which has those expressions, because we don't have time now to write that from scratch. In this example, I have the DAX expression written, coming up shortly, which is not a really complex DAX expression. It's just a set of logic behind it. So I'll go back to the model again. You see it is the same model. I'll go to manage roles just to show you where the filter criteria is. So this is my filter criteria on the profile table. So I'm not filtering the user table, I'm filtering the profile table. I say the ID of the profile is in this table. Now this table is filtered, the user profile table, when the email address of the user is equal to user principal name. I'm using some functions to help me in realizing that, of course, such as related. And the result of this table would be a table exactly similar to user profile table, but I would only pick their profile column using the select column. So with combination of related, filter, select columns, and in as an expression, I managed to say an expression like this that give me all the profiles that this logged in user has access to. And that filter is on the profile table. That, of course, automatically will filter the sales transaction table because this has the relationship. But then if you have a slicer of the users, that user table would, because it's not filtered, would show you everything. That means why you also need to define a filter on the user as well. So in the same role, we also have that simple rule of user equal to user principal name in the user table, which means this will filter that table and the user profile table. The other one will filter the profile table and the sales transaction table. Combination of these two together would show all the profiles that that user has access to and the sales amount of all of those that that user has access to. So as I said, I'm not going through like a full demo writing that one by one, step by step, but that is how the expression works. Is there any questions on this, Leon?
Fantastic, thank you, Reza. There are a couple of questions. So Debbie has asked that obviously she likes to stick to a star schema wherever possible. With the dynamic security shown here, it can start to get a little bit more complicated. You can see that we go to a snowflake schema with profile and user profile.
Yes.
Is it possible to stick to a star schema with this type of configuration?
It is. It all depends on your requirement and model. Of course, you always want to stick with the star schema. That is the preferred approach, but you also have to consider situations such as, for example, if I'm talking about, let's say, a star schema situation on a HR. So I have my, or let's say payroll. I have my payroll fact table in the middle. User is like a dimension, but I also have things such as, for example, the department that user belongs to. Department is another dimension normally connected through the fact table. I want to see, for example, only department that this user belongs to. So that means this table has to filter that table. So you still need this kind of logic, even in a star schema. You need to define your row level security rules sometimes on other tables than just the user table. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are not implementing a star schema. Your model is still a star schema, but you are defining your rules based on whatever table you want to get filtered.
Excellent, thank you. We do have one other question. It might take us over time, so I'll ask you anyway, but maybe we might not get the answer to it today. So in this scenario, if we had an RLS requirement whereby we had to filter based on the user, but the underlying transactions were only for a certain amount of countries, how would we look to implement something like that?
So we want to look at one user, but for certain countries. But does that user have access to those certain countries? I would ask that way, because if does, then it would be similar to this situation. So instead of profile, we would call it, let's say, countries, right? So this is country, this is the sales transaction, and this is where the user access to that country lives, right? So that would be similar to this situation, I would say, in that case, which can be implemented in the same way.
Excellent, that's fantastic. I believe that's all of our questions. Federico says simple but not easy. Is Microsoft or the Power BI team working on making security simpler to apply?
Security, I don't think so, first of all. Second is that security is not complicated. As you've seen, the static row level security is just like very simple. The very first example, remember I did it? You just define as many as rules you want. That is already simplified. But is simplified the best approach? No, because then you have maintenance problem with that. That is why we do it as a dynamic row level security. And that is why you write these rules and logic with that. So yeah, I would say this is not a product challenge. I would say this is more like a modeling and development challenge. There are easier ways to do it, but there are better ways to do it.
I totally agree, Reza. And with that being said, some of the better ways to do it are in, like you mentioned, your readily available row level security patterns book, to which there has been a link within the comments. And obviously you do have some further blogs or some further blogging available on radicad.com as well.
Yes, that is right. And as you mentioned, Leon, there are some examples I didn't have time to go through, such as, for example, what if we have a hierarchy of managers. For example, this manager will see the transactions of everyone who reports to him, but a higher level manager will see the manager underneath and all users underneath as well, like a hierarchical structure. Another example is how hierarchical and many-to-many relationship would work together. Another example is how if you want to have total but still rollable security, like you want to compare one branch with average of other branch, but they still don't see other branches. Another example is data masking, like these branches actually see other branches, but not as another branch, as something like unknown branch X, right? Masking data. I have written about all of these. I will share these slides with Leon. He would share it somehow with you. And of course, the book has all these examples, the blog and videos. Go and check them out and reach out to me if you have any questions.
Fantastic. Thank you very much once again, Reza. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your knowledge with our community, and also fully appreciate how early it is currently in New Zealand as well.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, and good to be with you and the audience.
No problem at all. And thank you very much to everybody in the audience once again for joining us at the Microsoft Power BI UK user group. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you've been here with us. And we'd like to say a special thank you to our sponsors, Onyx Data, once again for making these sessions available for us to put on for you. So thank you very much once again, everybody, and stay safe.